Hi. So this is the first lecture of a course on statistics for historians. So as I'm sure a lot of you have noticed, economic historians commonly use statistical methods to answer a wide range of historical questions. So here are just a couple of examples from the literature where the authors use statistical methods. So the first paper is by Nathan Nunn and Diego Puga, and it's called The Blessing of Bad Geography in Africa. And in that paper, the researchers find that actually geography, in particular the ruggedness of terrain, has long-lasting effects on development. And they use statistical methods to prove that what's influenced the slave trade actually continues to have effects nowadays. In the second paper mentioned here was rather wrong, a human capital theory of Protestant economic history by Sasha Becker and Becker Vesman. They explore one of the most famous hypotheses relating the Protestant ethic and development, but this time using county-level data gathered by the Prussian administration. And so that illuminates this question that a lot of people have written about. And the third paper is by Melissa Dell, and it's called The Persistent Effect of Peru's Mine and Meter. And it uses a very sophisticated design using some data on Peru and looking at the long-lasting effects of forced labor in Peru's mines and how the consequences of that can be seen even today. So there's a wide variety of questions that can be used thanks to statistical methods. And in this course, we'll see several of those techniques that you can use in your own research or just to understand the literature. So if we think about the structure of economic data, you will find different types of data sets. The first type of data sets that you can come across is what we call cross-sectional data. And that can be a sample of individuals, a sample of households, firms, countries, etc., but they're all observed at a given point in time. So one example would be a sample of parishes in 1831. Okay, so we gathered some information about those parishes, and but just at that one particular point in time. Okay? The second type of data sets that you may come across is what we call time series data. And in that case, the observations on a variable or several variables over time, but they all focus on the same unit. So for example, here, one example would be the series for the unemployment rate in the UK from 1920 to 1938. Okay, so we're only looking at the UK, and we have information about the UK. So for example, the unemployment rate over many time periods. So that's the main difference between cross-sectional data and time series data. Okay, with cross-sectional data, we only have one time period and we observe many units. With time series data, we observe one unit over many periods of time. But then you can also have a combination of both. And in that case, that's what we would call a panel data set. Okay, in this case, we observe a sample where we have the same individuals, household, firms, countries, etc., which are observed at different points in time. Okay? A good example would be the GDP per capita for African countries between 1970 and 2015. So unlike the previous example, where we were just looking at the UK, unemployment rate over time, here we're not just looking at the UK, but we have a series of countries, and we observe that variable, let's say GDP per capita, for many units over time. Now, the final type of data set that you may come across is what we call a repeated cross-sectional data. And in this case, you have a random sample of individuals, household firms, etc., that is observed each time at different points in time. So the current population survey in the US, basically the census data that is collected by the Statistical Bureau, is a good example of a repeated cross-sectional data set. They do not follow across time the same individuals, but they just randomly select a group of Americans every single time that they gather this information. So with this, you now have a good idea of the different types of data sets that you can come across. So we have the cross-sectional data set, we have the time series data set, the panel data sets, and the repeated cross-sectional data sets. And in our next video, we'll explore the type of variables that you could find in those data sets.